It's time for the show about the people and the places of the Carolinas, with the occasional visitors. In addition to hosting the award-winning syndicated TV show Life in the Carolinas, Carl White writes a weekly syndicated column and now hosts this weekly show, the Life in the Carolinas podcast. Now you can hear the story about the stories. And now, here's your host, Carl White.
Welcome to this week's Life in the Carolinas podcast. We've got a good friend in the studio with us, Don Miller. Now, Don, a lot of people know who you are. Some may not. So for those who don't, tell folks who you are.
Well, I guess right now I'd be looked at as a retired racer.
Yeah?
So, yes, I've been here in the Carolinas for about 35 or 40 years now. My wife and I moved here in the late 80s. My North Carolina life started off as a car owner with a driver you might have heard of, Rusty Wallace.
Yeah.
And our partner was Roger Penske.
Wow. So you're really going back in time. But now you moved from where?
Oh, originally we were both, my wife and I were both from Chicago, just the south side of Chicago, Junkyard Dog.
So you were close to the junkyard there, so there were cars in your life, mentally there. You come to North Carolina and you settle in Mooresville, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, we picked Mooresville because we were going to, we were going to build a race team from scratch, Rusty and I. We picked Mooresville for a lot of reasons. Number one, though, I think, was North Carolina is the center of all automobile racing. Now, it used to be Indianapolis, but now it's the Carolinas.
That's what we like to say.
And it really is. Yeah. And so we were looking for something that would be, really attractive for employees. It's a business like anything else, So we picked the area around Mooresville because, number one, it was only a couple of hours away from the coast. So there's recreation there. Right. We're only an hour away from the mountains. We were right here on Lake Norman.
So wait a minute. Are you telling me that you literally scouted the area just like any other big corporation would?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, we were looking for a place that we could settle down, build a facility, and keep our employees. Mm. That was the big thing because there was such an influx of business in that area, and there was also such an influx of interest in stock car racing at that point. So it was very difficult to keep good employees. So we wanted to make it as nice as we possibly could.
Nice. So the people in Mooresville, did they make you welcome?
They did. There was back then, the mayor was Joe Knox. I don't know if you've ever heard of Joe Knox.
Sure.
He was quite a character, and he and I hit it off right away. He said, so tell me about what you're going to do here. And I said, well, we're going to actually build a facility that builds race cars, and we're going to race them on the NASCAR circuit. And he said, oh, you're going to be one of those guys that drags in all that junk and leaves it lay all over the lawn out in front of your shop, huh? And I said, no, we're not going to do it that way, Joe. And I started, explaining to him what the idea was and how professional it could be. But at first, Joe was not buying it. And then finally, for some reason, he just looked at me and he said, you know what? I like what you're telling me. I think we should back you up. And he got hold of his crew over there, and he said, you got to help these guys get situated. And, one good thing led to another because as he helped us, we began to help them. And pretty soon there was an article. In fact, there was an article in the paper, and that had a little story about what Rusty and I were doing, and they referred to me as the Pied Piper of auto racing.
I think what you're talking about too is when we look at the heritage of racing, of the car culture in the Carolinas, that there was a time that it wasn't thought of at a high level, but you were presenting something that, to this mayor and to others, that would be the professional side, right?
That's what we were trying to portray, because let's face it, we're in Wilkesboro. All right, this was the capital of moonshine, right?
Right.
And it was, it was frowned upon by some and loved by others.
Right.
but by the same token, it had some rough edges, and the history, of automobile racing really was in the South, especially, was generated by that clientele, those people that had those cars that they ran the moonshine in were really souped up race cars with a stock body on them so that they could outrun the police, All
right, so let me ask you this. So before you moved to the area, right, before you made the Carolinas home, had you had the opportunity to meet some of those folk from the Wilkes County area?
Yes, I did.
Tell us about a few of those.
One of the guys that I'll always think fondly of was Junior Johnson, because I met Junior when, in fact, it was a kind of an odd deal. We were in Dover, Delaware, when I met him the very first time, and Richard Petty introduced me to him, and I asked him flat out. I said, "Junior, tell me a little bit about the history of running moon in the Carolinas." He said, "It wasn't just the Carolinas." He said, "People used to come down here to learn how to do it." and then, I hit it off immediately with him. I really liked the guy, and, he was a genius in his own right, but he was as open and honest with me as I could have ever asked for, and I learned a lot from the man. He was a folk hero. He really was a folk hero. People, back 40 years ago, 45 years ago, I look back and I think he was absolutely a hero. And, you could talk to anybody about Junior Johnson, and 90% of them were going to be, real promoters of not only Junior, but anything he did.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I think what you're sharing, and for our listeners and viewers, is the more intimate side of your business, and the fact that it's people, right? And wherever they're from, whatever their heritage is, you're meeting that on the road. So you met him, you didn't meet him in the Carolinas, you met him on the road.
That's right.
So the shop was on the road, right?
Right. And, that all stems from, at the time I was working for the Penske Corporation, and was involved with the IndyCar and Can-Am races, but we had always pushed Roger to get a stock car. We all, the guys that were on the team, we wanted a stock car, and my association over the years with Bobby Allison was key in that, because eventually we talked Roger into getting a car and putting Bobby in the seat, and over the years, I guess you could just say we became like brothers. He's as close as I'll ever get to anyone, especially at my adult age. But he was, he's like family to me, and he was the one who suggested, believe it or not, that we look at Mooresville. He said, if you're coming down there, I'd really like to be able to tell you that we could all do this stuff in Alabama, but he says it's not practical. Right. And so he said, you ought to try and take a look at Mooresville. They're pretty open. They're losing a lot of their industry because the mills are moving and things are closing down. He said, if we all got behind it, we could make it grow instead of shrink. And he was right. I mean, he hit hit it right on the head.
So when you came into Mooresville and brought your group, this business, into the area, these weren't a lot of Southern folk. These were people coming from outside to establish a new business, right?
Yes, that's very true. I mean, Rusty and I, at the time, both had come from Missouri, a border state.
Right.
and when we came down here, he originally started driving for a couple of smaller teams. When we really got serious about having our own team, we said, we need to find some place, like I told you, that would really be some place that an employee would want to come and work in.
Right.
You know, not out in the middle of the sticks, but, you know, close to the highway. Get to the point where you can move so you can go to the next location, you know, because it's like a traveling circus, whether anyone wants to admit it or not, you know.
Sure.
I mean, you got all these trucks, and they pull in there and set up camp.
Right,
and
right.
then they start driving around in circles. So you got to, there are times when you got to look at that whole group and say, I wonder what these guys are thinking. But as you know, it grew. We were lucky because we started that endeavor right when, you know, that sport literally exploded.
Right.
You know. And
How long did it take you from the time you moved in? All right, you're in your new house, and to where you said, "All right, we made the right decision."
Well, for me, it was immediate.
Okay.
You know, and you know, people don't realize it. They think it's all gravy, but we, Rusty and I both were hard-working Midwesterners. That's what we were. And appreciated, you know, a day's work for a day's pay kind of thing.
Right.
But, you know, when we decided we were going to do that, neither one of us had a ton of money.
So Penske was important.
Well, not only that, I think more than anything else, it was the commitment. Both of us were committed to do it. We knew it was really going to be hard because we had to go up against all these established teams. And if you don't win, you don't eat. That's what it comes down to. So
winning's important.
So winning is very important.
Right.
So we both mortgaged our homes. I was committed. I knew this was really what I wanted to do. But my wife took a while to think that it was a good idea. She always supported my racing endeavors, even all the way back to when we were drag racing, you know, back in Illinois. But
so support from your family has been important, right?
Absolutely. And one thing that always goes back to, there's a story in my life that almost got to the point where maybe what eventually did happen wouldn't happen. And it happened in the early 60s when I was engaged to my wife, Pat. And so she set the date for our wedding. And I said, okay. And she said, just be around. I said, I will. I was a drag racer then, and I was on it all the time, you know. I had this Corvette that I had been racing on the weekends at the drag races, and I won a ton of races. And occasionally did a little, not that I'm proud of it, a little street racing. And
just to keep you sharp.
Just to keep my hand in. Anyway, so it was the night before our wedding, and I was supposed to go to my bachelor party. And so I getting ready to leave work, and everybody was, you know, good luck, man. You know, okay. So I pulled out onto Highway 83, and there was a series of stoplights on 83, and I was in my Corvette, and I pull up to the first stoplight, and I'm just sitting there waiting for the light to change, and here comes this kid that used to come by all the time, want to race. At a 57 Chevrolet, a red one, I'll never forget it. He comes alongside, and he's winging the throttle and everything, and I'm going, oh, will you go away, kid? You know. So I pulled away and went up to the next stoplight, and of course he tore out and burned the tires and come along the side and wamba, you know, he wants to race. And so I'm like, oh, go away, just go away. So we got down to the last stoplight in that series, and that was open open highway, from there. I thought, well, I'm not going to screw around because, we're going to get married in the morning, I don't need to get busted, get a ticket or something and be late for my party. And the light changed and I took off and I hammered it in first gear and then just let off and slipped it in the second. Well, he continued to go like crazy, down to 83, and I looked in the mirror and here comes the cops. Well, unfortunately, they had been trying to catch me for a long time because I was rather notorious in that area. And so the one policeman knew who I was, and he was, well, we finally got you, and you're going to jail. I said, no, I can't go anywhere. I said, I'm getting married in the morning. Just give me a ticket and let me go. You're not getting a ticket. You were drag racing. I said, I wasn't drag racing. Well, we saw you. We saw that other car, and we got him, too. I said, I wasn't drag racing. I'd have blow that guy right off the highway, if I wanted to race him. He said, we saw it. We're not picking winners or losers. We're picking people that participate. Well, back then, the penalty for drag racing on the street was 1 year in jail, period. They hauled me off to jail, and I got in the jailhouse, and I said, well, what's the deal? He said, you get one telephone call, but you're staying here. I said, well, you mean there's no bond? Oh, you can get a bond. You have to set a bond, but your bond is $1,000. I said, well, obviously, I don't have $1,000. So I called home and told my dad, and he goes, oh, man, what the hell are you thinking about? And I said, I wasn't drag racing. He said, don't give me that. I know you. I said, I wasn't drag racing, Dad. So my dad had some money stashed, and then he went around to the neighbors, raised $1,000, came back to Oak Brook, Illinois, which was about 25 miles from where we lived, bailed me out of jail, got out of jail, went home, took a shower, changed my clothes, and went to get married. Right? So I'm out on bail for my wedding. My future wife said to me, I never thought I'd be getting married to a criminal. I said, stop it, So anyway, my father-in-law told me, he said, Don, I told Pat that, if this doesn't work out, she can always come home and live. I said, I'm glad I got all this support here. But, we made it through that, and my dad got a good attorney, and as it turned out, he convinced the court that I was not racing this kid. And I got off, and that kid didn't get, because it takes two people to have a drag race, so he didn't get to go to jail, but he got like a $500 fine. That was another life experience.
What a way to kick off a marriage.
Exactly. So we lived through that. We had a good start, right?
Yeah. So you started with fireworks, and you've kept them going.
Exactly.
Yeah. What a great story.
It was a big reach. Let me put it that way. It was a big reach because we went from having virtually nothing to having having a building and having employees and having all this equipment and trying to build cars, and we really didn't have the money to do that.
Right.
And, I had been with Roger for a long time, probably at that time, maybe 25, 30 years. And he and I were, had a good business relationship. I'd been in a couple of businesses with him. I trusted him implicitly, and I believe he trusted me as well. And when I told him that's what I wanted to do, he said, okay, I understand that. I'm a racer too, and you've been with us. He said, I can see where you want to go. And he said, but let me do this. Let me tell you, I'll put you on a leave of absence because I was a vice president of the corporation. He said, I'll put you on a leave of absence.
And this was at Penske.
At Penske.
Right.
And he said, if it doesn't work out, you can always come back. And I thought to myself, oh, it sounds like my dad, you know. But
does that give you a bit of confidence, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think would give anybody confidence.
Right.
You know, here's a man that was extremely successful, a guy that was a man of his word, and he was behind you.
Right.
You know, here's a guy that's saying to you that, okay, you know, you want to try this? I'm with you. You know?
Right.
So this is the funny part about it. We got going. We started building our building. We hired employees. Like I said, we did everything that we thought was right. We started building our cars, and we were in about a 15,000 square foot building that we had put up. And one day, actually it wasn't a day, it was an evening, Roger called up at my house and said, "Hey, how you doing?" And I said, I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing? You know, just kind of small talk.
Right.
And I said, "What'd you call me for?" And I said, I'm not ready to concede yet." And he said, "No, I'm not calling you for that." He said, I wanted to know if you still think that, you know, so seriously about this that can you guys make it work? And I said, "I'm sure we can make it work." And he said, "Well, do you ever entertain having another partner?" I said, "You know, there's been moments, but, you know, no, not really." I said, "But why? Why are you asking?" He said, "Well, I thought maybe you'd want to have me as a partner." And I said, "I would. I'd have to talk to Rusty about it and see." I said, it would give us a lot of stability. And, you know, I said, let's face it, you know a lot more people than I do, you know. And one thing led to another, and within a week, we were talking to the attorney, making a new company, a new corporation. And
how did that change things? Once that happened, what happened next?
The first big change was Roger said, "You know, you can't compete with these big guys, you know, out of this little building. I know you're going to try." He said, "But we need to build a proper facility." And I said, "Well, you know, we just don't have the funding to do that yet." We had a good sponsor. We had the Miller Brewing Company as a sponsor. He said, "Well, we need to talk to those guys. If they want to be our sponsor, they need to step up." And I said, "Oh, here we go."
Yeah,
So,
right.
But, you know, he was right. And we started building that building, but and it was a first-class, state-of-the-art, you know, facility.
So from 15,000 square feet
to about, I guess it was about 28,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Which was a sizable increase.
Sure.
Okay. Plus, we had the other 15,000 as a fab shop. You know.
Oh, so you built another facility?
Yeah, completely.
Okay.
So on the same property,
Right.
and we had a lot of room to do all that. So, so the one thing that I thought was really refreshing, though, is we built that car that we were going to take to the Daytona 500 in that little 15,000 square foot
Right.
shop. And at the time, we only had 9 employees.
Mm.
You know, when I retired in 2008, I guess it was, we were racing three cars, 3 separate cars in the Cup division, and we had another smaller group that ran a Grand National car. But the numbers were immense. I mean, we had then graduated to a facility that was built on 100 acres.
Wow.
And, you know, it was 400 square feet under roof. And the situation at that point was, I mean, so much larger. We started off with 9 employees, and at that point we had 300 employees.
You went home at night, and describe that moment in time where all of this growth is happening, and you're sitting there at home in the quiet, and you're just thinking, "Oh my gosh, this thing now.
This thing.
It's so massive. I mean, when did that dawn upon you?
You know, I don't think it ever dawned on me.
Yeah.
I'm being very honest.
Sure.
I think that things happen so fast, day after day after day, that you really didn't have a point in time where you could sit down at night and say, man, look what I've done, because
You didn't have a quiet moment.
right, because the next day was going to bring what?
Right.
Because it got to the point at that particular time when we had three really good race teams and three good drivers and and all these employees. It was like having a horse farm where you didn't have any mares. They were all stallions. And so
Right.
Your biggest problem every day was the people.
So all winners.
Well, everybody wanted to be a winner, and and they all wanted to flex their muscles all the time. And so
Hey, wait. I got to go back in time a little bit, because you'd shared with me at another time the story about going to the hardware store, right?
Yes.
So
That
here
was
you
my-
are.
That was my initiation to the Carolinas.
So that's your welcome to the Carolinas. So let's tell folks about that. And then my question is, now you got the big stuff going on. Did they change their tune? Tell that story
Okay.
real quick.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because like I said, we had moved here from St. Louis, and my wife and I had got this house, and I because I'm a tinkerer, I had to go around the house and find all the things that I thought were wrong.
Right.
One of them was that two of the faucets had a little tiny leak when you shut them up. So I wanted to go to the hardware store and get a couple of washers, for the faucets. And this is 35 years ago, 40 years ago almost. And so I went downtown Mooresville, and there's a famous hardware store down there, a place that I really grew to really love, because you could go in this hardware store and buy one nail if you wanted to.
Sure.
Back then. It was Turner's Hardware.
Oh, Turner's was old then. Right.
Yeah, he was one of the founding fathers, I guess.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went in there, and I didn't know Mr. Turner at the time, and I just talked to him, told him what I was looking for. He said, well, just go look around, see what you can find. I'll show you. Right back over there is where the washers and all the faucets and everything are. And I was walking around, I found my washers, and I was talking to Mr. Turner pretty loud, I guess, back and forth, because I was over by the washers, and he was behind the counter. And as I worked my way back to the back of the hardware store, there was a bunch of guys, not a bunch, 3, 4, 5 guys maybe. Anyway, they were all sitting back there, and finally this one guy hollers out, "Hey, you!" I said, "Me?" "Yeah." He said, "You ain't from around here, are you?" "No, I'm not." I didn't know what to say, And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I could tell." He said, "You know what the definition of a shame is?" "No, I guess I don't." "What is the definition of a shame?" And he goes, "That's a busload of Yankees going off a cliff with one empty seat." I went, wait a minute, what am I doing here? But, things have improved.
Things have changed, haven't they?
I think you once said to me that, the Civil War is not really all entirely over with yet. But,
Well, it's getting better.
Yes,
It's getting
it
better,
is.
right?
yes, but I've grown to love that town, and I really still go to Turner's every once in a while just to give my brain some shock therapy.
Yeah. But isn't that good, though?
It is. It's wonderful.
It's one of these iconic places, and a lot of people know about Turner's Hardware, and it is that step back in time, if you will.
Exactly.
But it's the same today as it was then.
Yeah.
Probably different guys at the potbelly stove. But.
I don't even know if that stove's there anymore. Come to think of it, know. But I know it was a real awakening.
But it's really interesting to look back at that time. It just kind of frames. I mean, you came to town. Nobody, they didn't know who you were.
Yeah,
Didn't know what you were doing. you're there to stop a leak like everybody else, you know. And then all these years later, and here we are talking about, you know, this amazing thing that happened.
That's exactly right. And,
here in the Carolinas.
People, as they go through life, have these kind of thoughts. I thought, did I do the right thing for my family? Or is this just an ego thing for me? You know, do I need to really rethink this? Or is it too late to rethink it? You know, should I have thought more about it? As time goes by, you have those thoughts if you're human. You know, you got to question yourself every once in a while.
I guess it's that journey, you know. It's kind of that process that's so important, isn't it? When you think about it, you did leave a good job, right?
Yes, I did.
You did leave a good job. You came to a bit of an unknown, but you had a good partner, right?
Exactly.
You had somebody you knew you could trust to do this with, and then here we are. When did your wife finally say, "Okay, this is all right now"?
You know, that's a pretty good question. I think that
Yesterday?
I don't know. No, that's not fair. She was very supportive all along the way, but I know she had her doubts because I think like any wife or woman that, you know, she's committed to her family, and when you take them away from their family and you take them to a different area where she knows no one.
Right.
The only one she knew was Rusty's wife, you know. So
kind of starting over.
We're looking at, wow, you know, this is going to be a big deal, and you know, it might not go the way we think it will. You know, she got to know a couple of people, and I think after about 6 months, it started to sink in, you know, that there were good places and good things to do. And the biggest problem was because we were starting from scratch. I was not home very often. You know, even in the heat of the day, you know, everyone says, well, you know, you guys in that race and stuff, you got everything going on, you know, you got everything. People are just dying to help you. And that's not true. You know, I mean, it was a struggle, and there was a lot of weeks in a row that I personally worked 100 hours in 1 week.
Wow, so it was an intense schedule.
Oh, it was just unbelievable. And
so, Don, it is a sport, yes, but it's also entertainment, and there's no really way to get around that because that's what draws the fans. Exactly. They're entertained by it. They want to see this activity. That's what brings the sponsors, right?
Right.
So it's like entertainers traveling to entertain. It's just your suitcase is much larger than most. You got to bring your own truck just to carry your luggage, right?
And you know, you have to move all the people. You know, right. It's a logistic nightmare at times.
But did you think that way? I mean, were you thinking about the audience? Were you thinking about the fans? Were you always mindful of that? Or did you just focus on, we got to win, we got to be faster, we have to give the best performance on the track?
Well, that's really an incredibly hard question to ask.
Sure.
And an even more difficult one to answer. I can tell you this, that I was guilty of being the guy that you described, that we absolutely have to win. We've got to do everything we can to win. Rusty was, he was just 2 years out from having won the championship. So he was more interested in, you know, what the fans think, and, you know, are we doing the right thing, you know, is he ever going to be a champion again? Will we win races, you know? And he and I would talk about it every once in a while and say, we got to just do what we got to do. You know, we got to win. We got to get out there and win. And it was a shock. It was really a shock for him especially. Not so much for me because I was kind of expecting it. But when we went to Daytona, now here you've got to think about this. Here is a guy with national recognition 1989, he had won the NASCAR championship.
Right.
Okay. Now we're in 1991. Go to the Daytona 500, and we were a rookie team. We were a new team. We didn't even get a garage stall. We had to go and work on the car out in the gravel behind the garages.
Right.
Because we were nobodies. We were starting all over again. And the guys that had accumulated points from the year before, they got the garage stalls. So
you weren't the only ones in the gravel.
no,
There were others too.
Yeah, back then, there would be
Right.
60 teams show up for 43 spots,
Right.
So you had to fight even to get into the race,
Right.
So he was like, "Holy cow, Don!" And I said, "I know." He said, "Don't you think we can talk to somebody?" I said, "No, we're going to earn our way in."
And this is after him already winning a big title.
Exactly.
And hear this reality, right?
Reality set in.
So how was that for him? I mean, that had to be a bit of humbling too, right?
It was humbling for all of us, but
Right.
you know what it did? It built a fire. It built a real fire. When we went in there, because back then you had to qualify
Right.
for the race, run speed, and then you had to run those 125-mile qualifying races, and you could get bumped out if you didn't do well in one of those races. If you crashed or something, and then you just weren't in.
Right.
You weren't in the race. And don't think that there was and that was before they developed the championship spot. If you were a previous champion, you could get in. And I remember we're like, well, what do we do? And, God bless him, Roger told us, he said, you know what, you guys just do what you normally do, and you're going to be all right. Stop thinking about the strategy of if you
Right.
race so-and-so and you stay so many, cars behind the leader. And
Drive
he said,
fast.
Just get in there, do your job,
Right.
and it'll all work out. And
Right.
it did. And we had a shot at winning that race. We had a shot at winning that race that we built in that 1,500 square foot garage. That was amazing.
Yeah.
But I think we finished 7th or something like that. But that was totally unexpected for the rest of the world. And
But you were in the game again.
We were in the game again. And Rusty said to me, you know what? He said, you know what? We're going to have a garage when we get to Bristol. And, everything was, it wasn't like, what are we going to do next week? It's, what are we going to do when we get to Rockingham? And everything was based on where we went next. The circus
Right.
was moving, and you had to move with the circus.
Yeah.
And when you got there, you had to start all over again. Because
So for Rusty, we got to win something because we got to have a garage.
That's right. So,
Yeah.
we had to work our way up. And believe it or not, 6 races into our first season, we won. We won at Bristol. And I think we won 5 or 6 races that. I might be wrong there. I can't remember. They all run together now. But we won a couple of races our very first season.
All right. So the first race, you're finally winning, right?
Right.
You've won. You're number one again. I mean, just describe that.
I'll tell you what. Can you imagine a man walking around every day with a 300-pound bag of rocks on his back? And then all of a sudden, somebody says, okay, you can get rid of those rocks now. That's what it was like. It was like, whew, wow,
Finally.
we're here, finally. But then you had the other guy on your same team, in your group, your partner, saying, hey, don't get complacent. That's just one. We need to win again.
Right. Yeah.
And then again, and again, and again, And I guess while we were there, I guess we won 60 sometimes. I can't remember.
Wow.
Every time you won, it was another victory. You know what I mean? It was like, wow, that was a lot cooler than
Right.
the last one.
So it's kind of like you keep on escalating.
The ladder gets set up steeper every time.
And it's a win for everybody. And it's not just for you. It's not just the driver. It's not just for Penske. It's for the team. It's everybody. I mean,
That's right.
Is that the way it felt? Was it this family win?
Yes, it was, because that's the kind of base that Roger set for us. He always made it. It's not you. You didn't do it. The team did it. We did it. It's a Penske victory. Roger had an IndyCar team besides our stock car team.
Right.
So, he had something always to say. You think you were so hot? We won last week. What happened to you guys? So that's what he do to us all the time.
So that leveling agent, right?
That's exactly right.
Wow.
And then you asked a question earlier about with the entertainment part of it. There was a guy that I got into a lot of, I guess you would call heated discussions, which was Mr. France, Bill France Jr. And he said something to me one day that at the time I resented, but after I thought about it for a little bit, I realized what he was trying to tell us, right? But it got down to the thing where he said, and this really stuck with me, he said, I don't need you guys. He said, I know you're racers and, you think that you're on top of the pile. We had, at that particular point, we had won 8 races already that season, and we wound up winning 10. He said, you got to remember, we're in the entertainment business. He said, if somebody comes along and wins all the races, nobody's going to come to the show. And he said, so I really don't care how many races you win, but if you win too many, it's not going to make me happy. So what would you say to that?
Wow. It would take a minute.
That's right.
To think that one through.
That's exactly right. So, he was a wise man. He was a very wise man. It's one of those things that, yes, you're driven by your own ego because you want to win, like so many things in this world. But by the same token, you're also confined by the science of it all. It's hard to get a mix when you get into the science of it all, because once you get into the science of it, you're pretty much handcuffed. It's, cows don't fly. You know what I'm trying to tell you? So
not on a sober night.
That's right. So, when you say, well, I don't know if that's going to work, it doesn't make any difference what you think. It's the facts. You know what I mean?
Go back in your memories and just some of those highlights, just things that when you think about it, it just makes you happy, in an extraordinary way.
I guess you would call it a life lesson. Yeah, I guess I was 15, and my dad had said, in fact, he encouraged me. He said, you really want to know and learn about how to build cars? He said, you're going to have to build one. So we went shopping, and we found this old 36 Ford Roadster. And he said, I'll help you when you get stuck, but you need to do this on your own. We took the engine out, and we rebuilt it and put it in. I put dual exhaust on it and everything, I didn't have a driver's license. I knew how to drive.
Right.
Because my dad had taught me how to drive, but he said, you're not driving this thing because there's no insurance on it. And I don't need somebody coming and saying we're in a wreck and they're taking my house away, Oh, I won't drive it, Dad. I just want to work on it. And I worked on it. Well, came the summer, and my family decided they were going to go up to my aunt's cottage in Wisconsin for a week. And I didn't want to go. I wanted to keep working on my car, and I had a job at the Sinclair station. I'll never forget that. And so I said, I'll stay home with Grandma, and I'll behave myself. He said, don't drive that car while I'm gone. I said, I won't. Well, unfortunately, it all got the best of me. And one day I thought I was pretty cool because I didn't think anybody was around that could do anything. But, that thing was loud. So I fired it up and I drove it around the block. I quickly put it back in the garage and didn't think any more about it. Well, they got home, and about 3 or 4 days after they got home, my dad came home from work and he said, come here, you. I said, yeah, what? He said, I thought I told you not to drive that car. Well, I didn't. Yes, you did. Don't lie to me. He said, our neighbors told me about you driving that thing around the block because it's so loud. And I went, oh, no. I said, yeah, I did drive it. He said, remember you gave me your word you weren't going to drive it. I said, yeah, I know, but, I just really wanted to drive it. You understand, don't you, Dad? He said, listen to me. I understand. I understand also that when you give your word, you keep your word. And you didn't keep your word, so I'm selling that car.
Wow.
I said, what? He said, I'm selling that car. He said, and you're not driving my car when you get your driver's license either. I could not believe it. I was in shock. I didn't talk to anybody, I think, for about 2 weeks. I didn't know what to say. And he sold it. So about 3 or 4 months after I got my driver's license, he said, well, did you learn your lesson? And I said, oh, yeah. I still think it was really mean, Dad. I don't think you should have done that, Well, I don't care what you think. I told you what the rules were. He said, so I saved the money I got from the car, and he said, I went out and I got you another car, just to start with, so then you can drive it for a while, and you can, and then when we get back on a better understanding, he said, then you can sell that, get whatever you want. Okay, Dad. I said, what is it? He said, well, it's out in the alley behind the garage. Take a look. It was a 48 Chevy, 4-door sedan. I went, of all the ugly cars in the world, I was like, oh my God. I didn't want to make you mad. I didn't want to say anything wrong, I said, thanks, Dad. I'll do my best. And I had to drive that thing. I was humiliated, because all my friends
that never quits.
Right. All my friends, had Fords with loud mufflers, all kind. It was just, it was terrible. But that's another entity. Led to another entity, though, because I had that car, and there was a man in the neighborhood who had just moved in, and he had a young family, and he needed a car, and he had a motorcycle. And he came over and talked to me one day when I was out in the back washing that thing. And he said, I need a car. He said, how'd you like to do a little trade? And I said, well, I don't like this car. So I said, what kind of car you got? And he said, I don't have a car. I got a motorcycle. I said, oh, I don't know. My mom doesn't want me to drive a motorcycle because I got hurt on a motorcycle when I wasn't supposed to be on it. And he said, well, think about it. He said, I'd be willing to swap you. And I was desperate. I wanted to get out of that car in the worst possible way, and I was going to school, So I thought, well, I could drive that motorcycle to school, and it won't be high school, and it won't be bad. And so I did the swap, and it was an English motorcycle. And this is something you probably have to look up to understand what I did here. I wanted that so I could swap it for something else,
Right.
And everybody's telling me, oh, that motorcycle will bring a lot more money than that 48 Chevy will. And I said, okay. So I eventually sold the motorcycle for like $300, I think it was, which was a lot more than I could have got for that 48 Chevy at the time. But now I look back and I think, my God, I should have kept that motorcycle, because it was a Vincent Black Shadow, and they didn't make very many of them. You have to look it up someday and see.
You would have a very large, very exotic car now for that.
So the value of that motorcycle now is in the six-figure range.
Oh, sure.
So, so it was one of those things, one of those decisions you make. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. So
those lessons in life, those things that we go through. Wow. Your career has taken you in so many different exciting directions. But as you're getting, there's so many things to talk about. I think we could probably be here for a couple of days just getting the stories down. But I do want to talk about the evolution of the things that brought you to the place where you formed the North Carolina Auto Racing Hall of Fame, how that came about, and then we'll talk about some of the other charitable things that you do as well.
Actually, the Hall of Fame was it was an offshoot, believe it or not, of one of our charitable ventures. Back in 1990, I guess it was, right around in there, Rusty and I were just starting to build that shop that we talked about. And we were having breakfast one morning at a little restaurant in Mooresville, and this man came up. This is ironic. I can remember the man's name. This man came up to us. We didn't know him from Adam, And he said, "Hey, my name's Pete Miletus." I said, "Yeah." He said, I work for the city." And he said, "You're the two guys that are building that race shop over there on the other side of Route 77, aren't you?" "Yeah." He said, you guys got a lot of star power." I said, "What?" He said, "You guys got a lot of star power. We could use you to help us with some of our problems here in the city." And Rusty looked at me like, I wonder what this guy's smoking, And so I said, "Well, enlighten us." And he said, "Well, you have kids, don't you?" "Yeah." He asked Rusty, and Rusty said, "Yeah." And he said, there's a big problem around here." He said, "And it's not just here, it's everywhere." He said, "But, child abuse is a big problem. And we need to get something together to help raise some interest in combating it." And I said, "Really? Okay. Yeah." And I didn't know what to do, I was like, "Yeah, okay." But the more he talked, the more it made sense. And he said, "Is there anything you guys think you could do to just put something together to raise a little money, especially around Christmas? Because Christmas is right around the corner." And I said, "Let us look into it." So he left, and he gave us his card. And Rusty said, "Oh, what the heck? What could we do?" And I said, "I don't know. We could have a car show or something." He goes, "You can't do everything. It's a car show with you, And I said, "Look, you come up with an idea, He said, "I don't have any." I said, "I knew that a long time ago." But anyway, here's the idea. I thought we could have a car show kind of thing, and we use race cars. And that would help us break in to the area with some positive identity. And I said, on top of that, with a little luck, if we get a couple of the other drivers to come over and sign some autographs along with their cars, we could possibly have, we could possibly actually bring in some pretty good crowds and raise some money. "Oh, yeah, we could charge them to come in." I said, "Yeah, that's the idea." And so anyway, one thing led to another, and we talked to the city fathers, and they let us use the armory there in Mooresville, and we had lots of help, and we cleaned it all out, and we had this all set up, and we probably had 15 or 20 race cars in there, stuff that people don't normally get to go up and touch and see.
So you had a good turnout.
We had a barn burner. I mean, the city, they wanted to strangle me. Because I told them, it'll be all under control. It won't be a big. I mean, the streets were blocked off. They couldn't, nobody could use the street, and people were complaining. Well, I've been here for 2 hours and I can't even get my car out, and stuff. Right. So it was a absolutely fantastic success. We raised a lot of money, brought in all kinds of toys, and
let me ask you something. In the beginning, so the cause is domestic abuse, domestic violence. So you were just doing something to help, but did you know? I mean, was it just okay? We'll help, or was there a reason that you wanted to help? How did that evolve for you?
I think it was driven by the fact that I thought about it and I talked it over with Rusty, and I said, this guy's got a point. I mean, we're lucky because we got enough wherewithal to take care of our kids, but a lot of people don't.
Right.
And he said, well, that's not, and he was right. He said, that's not our responsibility. I said, I think it's everyone's responsibility.
Right. It's
something that we all should think about every once in a while because, God smiled on us. He didn't necessarily smile on everyone. So he got behind it, and we did what we were going to. That brings me to a thought. Just a minute here. I want to tell you about this. This thing actually brought tears to my eyes that day of the thing, of the show, because it was cold out. And this little girl, probably, I would say she wasn't around maybe 8 or 9 years old. She came in there, and she was with one of the policemen from Mooresville. And I said, what can I do for you? And I was sitting there and I was signing along with Rusty. And he said, this little girl didn't have the money to pay to get in, but she has something she wants to give you. And you could tell she didn't have a lot of money. She had this little bag. It was looked like a little tobacco pouch or something. It was a little bag with a string on it. And she said, I wanted to give you this for the children. And here she is a child, right?
Right.
I want to give you this for the children. She said, because Mr. Miller, guess what? And I said, what? Me and my brother took all our pennies out of our piggy bank and we put them in here for the kids that don't have a Christmas. It still makes me inside. Makes you want to cry, That little kid was that was America, boy. That's how we all need to be once in a while, just to get an idea of what goes on in this world.
Was it that moment that you realized you're doing the right thing?
I knew we were doing the right thing before then, but that put the stamp of approval. Just absolutely. It was just amazing. I told my wife about it, and she cried. She said, well, you did the right thing, Don. Yeah, it was the right thing, I'll tell you that. And then we went on to improve on it every year, and, we've raised just the toys for children, hundreds of thousands of toys for the children.
Were you involved with any of the distribution process?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, I went. I would go with the charity workers, and we would distribute the toys and take them to hospitals and take them to places like.
Tell me about some of those memories that you have from just seeing what the need truly is.
I'll tell you the big one. Talk about the big one. We there was a terrible flood down here in the Carolinas. Really hit the little town of Goldsboro really hard. And, they contacted us at the Stocks for Tots, and that was the name that we had given to our charitable event, and said, when Christmas rolls around, please keep us in mind because, the need is so great around here. So we went around, mostly me, I guess, and one of our truck drivers, our transporter driver, and we called Big Joe. He's no longer with us. He went to the big racetrack in the sky. But Joe and I went around and we went to the various race teams, and we got a couple of the big transporters and we emptied them all out. And we made a vow that we were going to fill those transporters with toys. And we went around to everybody we knew and we loaded those things. And we got in those trucks and I went with them. And down the Girls Barrel we went and we unloaded them. We had everything. We had everything from a stuffed teddy bear to a bicycle. It was amazing. And the people were just, they couldn't believe it. Yeah. And when you saw their faces, it was hard for you to believe it. You know what I mean? It was just like,
you knew you were making a difference.
Knew that was the right thing to do. Yes, sir. That was, as we call it, the big show. That was really something.
Would you compare that emotion, that feeling of satisfaction, of knowing you're doing the right thing, would you compare that to a win on the track?
I guess there is a comparison. The feeling of elation is the same. The circumstances obviously are not the same. However, we talked about it earlier. The excitement it generates.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you can't buy that. You can't go to the store and, yeah, give me a box of excitement. You know what I mean? This is
right.
This is the real thing.
Maybe one's a win for the team and one's a win for humanity.
Yeah, you could say that. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just it's a whole different thing. It's refreshing and it's clean and it's wholesome. Is
that why you still do it?
Yeah, I think so. It's part of it anyway. It's I know that every year it gets a little bit more difficult. Probably because I'm getting a lot older. But still, I know that the people that are involved have everything. Their hearts are in the right place. They're there because they want to be, not because somebody told them to be.
Right.
Or told them, boy, that'd be a great thing for you to do, and it would be good press, Right. They don't do it for that. They show up because they know it's the right thing to do, Mm-hmm. To just pass on some of the good things that you received in your life.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
All of us can moan and groan about what happened yesterday, but in my book of things, what happened yesterday doesn't really count. That's ancient history. It's what you're going to do tomorrow that counts. Mm-hmm. I try. My wife gets on me all the time. Don't talk like that because it is. It just doesn't go away just because you want it to go. I don't want it to go away. It needs to go away, but I don't want it to go away. It's over with already. Mm-hmm. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not being hard. I'm just being honest. Mm-hmm. All that you did yesterday it's all good. Don't get me wrong.
But it's in the history book.
But it's part of history.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one thing that Roger used to say to me all the time, and it used to just infuriate me, right? Because I'd say, we did last week. We did this and this and this, and he said, "That's nice. What have you done for me lately?"
Right.
And
as in the past few minutes.
That's right.
And more so, what are you doing tomorrow, right?
Right. So that.
So really, that lesson, that message, is for us today. So it's for all of us, no matter what day it is, no matter what the victory was yesterday. It's like, okay, great. Now let's go do something good tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all part of it. And and once again, it's the It's the team. I mean, everybody has a team, even if it's their wife and their children. That's their team, and they work together to achieve certain things.
Or communities.
Yeah, exactly.
Or an old hardware store.
Exactly. Or an old
Let's learn to love Northerners. Maybe.
Maybe.
Possibly. So the Hall of Fame now, how many, kind of tell folks who haven't been there or don't know about it, what that's all about?
Well, after we got, stocks for Tots going and it, produced.
And it's still going.
And it's still going, yeah.
Right.
And we got that going, and there was a guy that I used to hang around with a little bit. He actually owned the park over there, the industrial park, and his name was Bob Ebert. And Bob and I used to commensurate every once in a while over a cold beer and just talk about what would make things better. And he was just so over the top about what we did with stocks for Tots, and and how he used to tell me, he said, do you know how much value you really have with that? Do you know what it does? It boosts social services, over the top every year. You guys don't understand how important it is. Okay, I mean, Bob was he was really involved with the community. And so one day we were sitting there, and he said, he used to come up with these, one-line statements that would just, I wonder why I didn't think about that before. But he said to me, he said, Don, he said, you're always telling me about this is the center of racing, stock car racing especially. He said, well, why don't we have a museum here? It tells people about the history of the sport. There is no. I said, well, there's one in Darlington. He said, don't tell me about that thing. He said, I've been down there. It's open once a year, and then, it's never run very. I said, I don't want to get into that, Bob. So what's your thought? He said, I think that you and I should each put in a little bit of money, and we'll go find a building here in Mooresville, and we'll start a museum for automobile racing.
Just like that.
Just like that. I mean, Bob, there was no, to him, he'd say, oh, Mount Everest? That's just a lump. Next week I think we ought to get some skis and ski up.
Right.
Okay, Bob,
right.
Have another beer. So anyway, he told me, he said we could do that, So I said, well, how about around here in the park? That would be the perfect place, in Lakeside Park. And he said, he said, that place that's almost across the street from your race shop? And I said, what, the old tailpipe factory? And he goes, yeah. He said, that building's going to go up for sale. They went upside down financially. I said, Bob, that place is a toilet with doors. And he goes, well, you know what? There's nothing that can't be fixed. I was just shaking my head. I said, you know what? That's what the chief mechanic on the Titanic said. And he just goes on and on.
Right.
So anyway, we went over there, and sure enough, it was for sale. And we beat the guy down a little bit, and we bought it. And then one day, about a week later, I went in there and turned the lights on and almost threw up. I mean, that place was filthy.
So you weren't too off the mark when you first titled it.
Exactly. It was filthy. It was greasy, dirty, filthy. Right. It took us, with a lot of volunteer help, it took us about 6 months to clean that place up.
Wow.
Anyway, we built a little office, and we built a gift shop in there, and we fixed the air conditioners, and we patched the holes in the roof, and we did everything. And Bob was right there, swinging the hammer, and he was a very successful businessman, by the way, but a hell of a guy with a great sense of humor. And so we opened that thing up in 1994. We opened that thing up. And do you ever hear the word an instantaneous success?
Sure.
This place was Katie bar the door from the very first day. We had a guy in there managing it, and we had a couple of people that worked there, and then we had some volunteers. And it took off like a rocket ship. And when there'd be a race, at Wilkesboro or Rockingham or even as far away as Bristol, and it, not even mentioned in Charlotte races, you could not do. We had to get the police, because we had a good standing with the mayor, right? He would give us police protection for that area because he would close off that street.
So there were that many people coming.
It was wall-to-wall people, wow. Elbow to elbow, and they would come, they'd stand in line for hours to go through there. Unbelievable. I've never seen anything like that in my life. And so, the race shops are in that area at that particular time. That was the center of the universe of automobile racing. I mean, they'd open up their doors and they'd have a little area where the people could come in and visit and get souvenirs. And I mean, it was Katie bar the door. And Bob said, you know what? One day, over another cold beer, he said, what we're doing is good, but it's not as good as it could be. And I said, okay, tell me how we make it better. He said, we should turn this into a foundation. And he said, you need to go to Raleigh and get a charter for us to name this the North Carolina Auto Racing Hall of Fame. And we will pledge that we will turn this into a foundation, and we will give all the profits from the operation of this to the abused children in the Carolinas, just like you do with Stocks for Tots. I said, and? He said, then don't worry about our investment. He said, that's yesterday.
And forever raising money for abused kids.
Exactly.
Wow.
Even to this day, and as time went on, things change, the economy changes. I don't have to tell you all the things that change, but now it's operated strictly by volunteer personnel, and we still operate it with the same premise that all the money that it does generate, at the end of the year, other than the expenses of of operation, goes to the kids.
Do you feel good about that as part of your legacy?
Oh yeah. I didn't do it as part of my legacy. I just did it because I thought, you know what, this is an opportunity for us as part of the racing community, to give back to those who allow us to do what we do. And that's that's how I look at it. I mean, it's just to me, it's what we should have been doing all along. You know what I mean?
But through this particular space, this environment that's created, it's all about the preservation and presentation of the history, that heritage. So it's something that people can, who have interest in the car culture in the Carolinas.
Yeah, and look what it's done. Look what it has done over the years. It's brought people from all over the United States of America to come at Christmas time to Stocks for Tots. In fact, this Stocks for Tots in 2020, unfortunately, will be the first time in 31 years, 31 consecutive events, that we won't be able to have a Stocks for Tots because of the coronavirus. Because we cannot put people inside of a building, bumper to bumper, as they, and then we stack them in there when we have that. It's a 2 or 3 hour, 4 hour event. And
so there's going to be a hiatus this year for that product. But maybe next year, everything will be back.
Oh, yeah, hopefully we'll go right back to normal. The the drivers and the crew members that come and sign autographs, they're not going to change their mind. You know,
Of course not.
They're still going to give back. So they just need somebody to direct the traffic. I guess that's what I am. I'm the traffic director.
Well, you got different jobs, right?
Yeah, exactly.
At different times.
Different hat.
Yeah, that's right. But people still can help, though, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have.
I mean, the need has
has not changed. Right.
It's there.
Right. Yeah. The horse is still the same color.
Right.
So we have to figure a way to saddle it again in a different way. And so this year, what we're going to have to do is appeal to the public, the people especially that have come from around the country. They can't travel, they can't come, they can't participate, but they can still give.
Right.
And so we're asking them to make donations this year, flat-out donations to Stocks for Tots, and help the children bring their toys and their gifts and things to either the North Carolina Auto Racing Hall of Fame or to the NASCAR school over here in Mooresville. So,
right. And we can direct people to your website, and it'll have information on it.
And it has all the information on it.
What is that website, Don? What's the website for the?
I don't know. I don't know.
We'll put that on there. This whole journey has been remarkable. I mean, and we've only touched on it. We really have. We just touched on a few pieces. I love the story about how this seed was planted, you know, and with a fast drive around the block, right? Mm-hmm. And you've had a lot of those since then, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. I've been around the block for sure. that's an understatement. Yeah. You know, it's not all been gravy either. I'll tell you what, there was an incident back in 1974 that almost ended it all.
Really? What happened?
Yeah. We were dabbling in stock car races back then at Penske Racing, and we had a stock car that we raced in limited number of events. All of us, because we were a small group at Penske Racing, we'd be working all week, and then we'd fly into wherever we were going to race, and then we'd become the crew. At the time, we were racing, believe this or not, an American Motors car, the Matador.
Wow.
Everybody, no one could believe it. Why not a Chevy or a Ford or a Mercury or anything but a Nash? You know what I mean? And, you know, it was just one of those things where, you know, Roger was very successful racing an AMC Javelin and won the Trans Am Series, which was a road racing series. And so it kind of evolved, and we wound up with the Matador. And the next race on the schedule was Talladega, Alabama. So flew into Talladega, and we did a lot of public relations work before the event. And then on race day, we took turns doing, you know, different jobs during pit stops. And at that particular weekend, I was going to do fueling, but it turned out I did the catch can for the fueler. We had the Matador, and everybody laughed about it, and then we put it on the pole and led the race with our driver at the time, which was Gary Bettenhausen, which ironically was from my neighborhood back in Chicago. And so Gary was leading the race, and he was a hell of an IndyCar driver and sprint car driver, everything. Anything he got into, he could drive. And he was leading the race, and it rained. And we thought, well, it's over with now. We're going to win the race. Well, it started to clear, and they decided they were going to restart the race and finish it. You know, they started it, and you know the track was just starting to dry, but they didn't do the first thing about cleaning pit road. So back then, no one thought about it. You know, it wasn't a safety issue. You just had to slow down. But there was no speed limit in the pits back then. On a pit stop, if you went 100 miles an hour and you could stop the car in time, that's fine. If you went 150 and you could stop the car in time.
But when it hadn't been cleaned,
it was up to the driver's discretion. So anyway, we decided we were going to pit, and maybe half the field decided to follow Gary in. Gary came in the pits, stopped, and we jumped out to start servicing the vehicle. And to this day, I remember it like it happened 20 minutes ago. I hear this shh noise, and one of the cars coming on pit road was going too fast, hit the brakes, locked them up, spun the car, and spun in, crashed into us at about 80 miles an hour while we had the car up on jacks, right?
While his crew was changing tires and refueling the car, Grant Adcox in the Chevy number 41 came in hot, skidded, and crashed into the Matador.
And it pinned me between that car and our car in the pit wall and cut my legs off. Broke half the bones in my body. Well, immediately I was down and it hurt a bunch of the other guys on the team, and the people were trying to help us out, and Roger was like a machine. He reacted like you would under fire in a gun battle. He started giving directions, and I heard him saying, "You get that ambulance over. I don't care about the fence. Tear the fence down." I heard all that stuff. I was conscious, but I was in shock, so right. I didn't hurt as bad as I should have. And I said, Roger came over and he said, "Are you okay?" And obviously I wasn't. He could see that. And I said, "I think I can get up." He said, "You can't get up, Don. Look at your leg." My leg was like out here, my right leg. And I didn't really have a tremendous amount of pain. And then one of the other crew members from the car that was pitted in front of us was a friend of mine, Buddy Parrott. He came running over and he took off his belt and made a tourniquet, put it around my leg, and they got the ambulance through the fence. It was a long story, but they were not prepared for this to happen. Anyway, loaded me into that ambulance, took me to the infield care center, and the doctors were in there, and Roger was there, and he was giving directions and everything, and they said, we can't help him. This is way beyond us. You need to take him to the hospital. And Roger said, "Well, you got a helicopter?" So we don't have a helicopter. We have an ambulance, and you saw it. It was this old raggedy '59 Cadillac ambulance. I think it was a hearse at one time. That should have been some kind of a signal, right? But I remember getting in that thing, Roger and I and one of the other crew members that was hurting really bad, and they took off for Anniston, Alabama, which was about 35 miles away, and I was bleeding like a stuck pig, right? And I'd go in and out of consciousness, and I could remember Roger telling me, he said, "Don, don't try and talk. Don't, just save your energy. You're going to need it. Save your energy." I said, "I'm not worried about my energy. I'm worried about this guy crashing this ambulance." I said, this thing feels like it's out of control. So, so we were laughing, and there I was laughing about it. I was going to die. And so we got to Anniston, Alabama, and it's a small town, but luckily it has some pretty good surgeons. We got to the hospital, and I remember the doctor coming in and looking at me, and then they went like to the doorways, like I couldn't hear him or something. And the doctor said to Roger, "We can make him comfortable, but he isn't going to make it." And Roger said, "Yes, he is. You get somebody in here right now that's got a better attitude." And he was running the show. And then in comes this surgeon, and I didn't know it at the time, and he came in and looked at me. He said, "You're hurt really bad, you know that?" I said, "Yeah." He said, all we can do is the best we can do. And I said, I guess I can't ask for anything else. Then I went out again, you know. But it turned out his name was Dr. Taylor. I'll never forget that. And he was a crackerjack, but I was in surgery for 6 or 7 hours, and then more the next day, and over a period of weeks, they took my leg off and stitched up the other side, and my pelvis was broken in 3 spots, and broke my jaw, and I mean everything. I mean,
you're in pieces.
Yeah, pieces. Yeah. And my wife and Kathy Penske, Roger's wife, they stayed with me, and till they finally said after a couple of weeks, you know, you're probably going to make it. And
but up until then,
it was touch and go, and then I was more weeks in a hospital, and used to this. You're going to be in a wheelchair the rest of your life. You're never going to walk again. You were too badly broken up internally, and I said, I'm going to walk again, and I'm going to walk again soon.
What pushed you?
Because I didn't want to be a cripple. I just made up my mind it wasn't going to be. I remember my daughter. She was my youngest one, Trish. She said, she used to come in and talk to me when I was laying in the bed, and I was always in pain, you know. I had no leg. And one day I was unbandaged, and she'd come in and she looked, and I could tell she was really concerned, you know. And she said, don't worry, Dad. I said, I'm not worried, Trish. Oh, no, I'm going to be all right. No, I mean it. It's growing.
She told you your leg was growing back.
I mean, you know, it was just, there was so many days like that, you know.
Yeah.
Those little cries when they'd say, Mom, Dad fell again. Anyway, yeah, I got to the point where I could first do crutches, and then kind of like a walker and a crutch, and then an artificial limb. And that was really painful, because the stump was so short I could, you know, I just could hardly navigate. But I learned, and then by the fall race, I can't remember what month it was the fall race at Talladega, I was at the racetrack on crutches with an artificial limb.
And during that entire time, your hope, your goal was to get back on the track?
Oh, yeah. I didn't want to be a cripple. I didn't want everybody.
Well, that's one thing. That's one thing, Don, to not want to be a cripple. But you're wanting to go back to the very place that happened.
Well, I didn't care where it was. I just wanted to get. I wanted to get out of the hospital, and I wanted to go I wanted to go back to the racetrack, you know. And
how long did that process take before you were physically able and emotionally, you know?
Oh, emotionally, I was able, you know, right away.
Okay.
But physically, it must have been a year. About a year before I could really start to get around on my own, you know.
Mm. So your first time being back, you know what I'm saying, being back in your business.
It wasn't fast enough. It was like, well, how long is this going to take, kind of a thing, you know? So when I really did get back, when I was moving around, I didn't even think about it then. I was like, okay, let's go. Whatever it takes, let's keep moving. We got a lot of stuff to do.
So you just picked up?
Yeah, exactly. And Roger wouldn't let me get behind, because I was still recovering, and he started the International Race of Champions, and he said, I'm going to take you back to Reading, because they got a really good rehab hospital there, and we could keep an eye on you. And he said, but I'm going to have you be in charge of that IROC series and getting all the cars together and the parts and everything. You and Jay worked together. Jay Signori was my buddy, and he was running the IROC series. So I procured all the parts for all the race cars and made sure the logistics were right and everything. I was doing that from a wheelchair.
Wow.
So, you know, And, my wife came to Reading and stayed with, we had some really good friends there because, it was part of the Penske Corporation. I really tried hard. I wanted it to happen.
And eventually you got back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just kept on going. Yep.
So a lesson for all of us, right? We just keep on plugging away no matter what.
That's right. You got to chip away at a little at a time because it ain't going to happen overnight.
Well, what a great visit we've had with you, Don Miller.
Well, there'll be more.
So if people didn't know you, we give them a earful today, didn't we? And I think that's great. I mean, I love doing what we do. The definition of our programming, the content we work on, is to celebrate the people and places of the Carolinas and, the great things that we do, the things that we do to make a difference, the things that we do just to survive.
That's right.
And, some folks were born here, others came.
That's right.
And assimilated.
Exactly.
Like yourself. And now you're one of the people and sharing your life still yet after all these years. What a great thing. Don, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, we really appreciate it and look forward to many more visits together because there's a lot of story to tell.
Oh, boy.
Thanks for listening to the Life in the Carolinas podcast. If you enjoyed your time with us, please visit the show's website at lifeinthecarolinas.com. Join our mailing list, and we'll keep you updated every week on what we have coming up and other interesting things around the Carolinas. We value you as a podcast subscriber. We'll see you next week. And remember what Carl says, it's never a bad time for a good story.